Welcome to the Founderville.vc podcast. This is where we love to bring in founders, and entrepreneurs, and investors, and heck, anybody that just loves supporting entrepreneurs. Today, we've got Mr. Capers Easterby with us. My name's Shay Hauser. I've got my partner, Scott Millwood, and we are fired up to have a good friend of the podcast, good friend of Founderville, an investor in Founderville.vc. So welcome to the podcast, Capers.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Heck yeah.
Honored to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. This is a good thing. So we'd love to hear about your background a little bit. We'd love for you to tell some of the story about, as Scott likes to say, the struggle bus, the building of the career, the left turns, the right turns, the many turns that you've taken. You know, you guys both went to Clemson. I feel like we have a lot of Clemson grads on here, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that. But not many Citadel grads.
I don't know. I mean, there's a reason I got that on today.
I need to do a better job of finding some Citadel grads.
Well, you're kind of in the belly of the beast. I mean, Greenville's kind of the belly of the beast.
It's hard. And, you know, I feel bad for some of the Carolina fans because they seem to be missing out on the fanciness of this podcast here. But our next guest actually is both Clemson and Carolina, so we'll see how she does on this thing. At any rate,
she's Clemson, but anyway.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, interesting career, right? I mean, got out of Clemson, went to work for Sunoco, big Fortune 500 industrial manufacturing.
Great company.
Great company. Okay. Then you took this detour, this turn to get your MBA.
Yes.
And then went into venture capital. How did that happen? Because Scott and I are trying to learn venture capital right now. I think
accidental VCs.
Accidental VCs. I think we're making progress, but we'd love to hear about that.
You guys are doing a great job. So anyway, I actually grew up in Greenville, so we both have that in common. Scott, you grew up in Spartanburg, so we're all natives of the upstate. And I'm actually fourth generation graduate of Clemson in my family. My daughter's now the fifth.
Wow.
This goes back to 1903. So my great-grandfather was in the first 10 graduating classes. So it was expected that I would attend Clemson, and I did, and had a great experience. I can't say I was a great student, but I can say I had a great experience. Majored in industrial management, and at that time, Sunoco, and I'm sure they still do, recruited from Clemson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I had the opportunity. Was offered an opportunity in their management training program. Was assigned to a manufacturing facility in Atlanta, and was there for 2 years, and then was offered the opportunity to be one of their very first. I'm not sure we were sales representatives, but we were product representatives of their grocery bags. Not many people know, but Sunoco was one of the first manufacturers of the plastic grocery bags. And so I had a great experience opening up the West Coast, the Safeway food chain for Sunoco products. So we would literally go and teach the cashiers and the bagging people how to pack out a grocery bag, how to pack out a plastic grocery bag. And so, for a 23-year-old, not married, no real family obligations, I spent the summer going up the coast of California, spent several days in Reno, and then in the Washington State, and then ended up in Alaska.
Dang.
Ended up in Fairbanks, Alaska, of all places. First, I was on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska for a few days, and then ultimately sent me to Fairbanks. Had met people from the Carolinas that had moved there with the military. They took me fishing. It was really phenomenal. And I'm kind of convinced that Safeway opened them up in these smaller markets because they wanted to test them before they brought them into San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the metropolitan areas. And then I came back to work for Sunoco in a more traditional business as a sales representative for another 2 years, and realized that while Sunoco is a fantastic company, managed by outstanding people, and I think they have grown wildly since I left them 25 years ago now. But I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to control my own destiny. I didn't want to have to, go from job A to job B to job C, and progress up this corporate ladder as someone else determined that, that
absolutely
that course.
A lot of us share that same background.
Yeah, and I do think growing up in Greenville, you're surrounded. It's a pretty entrepreneurial community.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
And if you look back at the history of Greenville, the people who have been successful have been first the mill owners, and then the construction companies, the builder marts, the Daniels, So you had examples. You
Long
had
history, and you're right around it all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I had friends whose fathers had businesses. My grandfather and father had a automobile company. Right. So it was not a foreign thought for me to say, I want to strike out on my own. But I realized that I probably needed some additional skills to do that, and kind of looked around at various business schools, Virginia, Duke, Chapel Hill, Emory, Vandy, South Carolina, and kind of thought these are I want to live in the South. I'm not really particularly interested in going to Chicago or New York. I would like to find. I'd like to enroll and graduate from what I think is one of the 4 or 5 best business schools in the Southeast, and gives me the best chance of living in the South. Yeah. And Emory was on the verge of getting a tremendous donation from Roberta Gosueta, who was the retiring chairman of Coca-Cola. It is in the largest city in the South, 2 hours from Greenville. Just really right in the heart of the region where I wanted to work and live. And so, I applied, it was accepted, and ultimately graduated from Gosueta. About the time I was getting out, South Carolina had created a seed fund called Palmetto Seed Capital. It was based in Columbia, and I interviewed and was hired. And so that was really my first introduction to the venture capital world, private equity, startup businesses, because our mission was to invest in companies that were 3 years old or younger. So corporate telemanagement group was a great investment for us, because I think you guys were 2.5 years old. Yeah. You had some revenue. You were growing. It was a very understandable business, and with people who obviously knew what they were doing. And that that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to do a lot very similar to what Founderville is doing. But we were doing it on a statewide basis. We were trying to find those companies and those founders who we thought had the capacity to create substantial businesses, and help them by not only investing in them, but trying to bring other investment into the state. And the thought was, if you had a lead investor in the state who could not only seed these companies, but then help them through the fundraising process, that you could create successful businesses. And we did. We had a corporate telemanagement group, which turned out to be very successful. There was a company called FGP, which was a criminal justice technology company. That's actually owned now by Brad Balinga, who we all know. Brad was operations manager there. It was founded by a gentleman named Barry White, and they had a really interesting technology for documenting inmates and managing inmates. So that was, that they ultimately, created a business that was that merged with a larger company. I think, Brad eventually kind of spun out after that and did his own thing. So I was there for I think 3 or 4 years, and then we had the opportunity to merge with Emergent Group, and we created something called Emergent Capital that had both the early stage fund, and then we created a later stage mezzanine group that we called Emergent Capital Advisors or Emergent. I'm sorry. It was Palmetto Seed Capital and Reedy River Ventures that was managed by Emergent Equity Advisors.
Okay. Yeah.
And Reedy did later stage mezzanine finance deals, and Palmetto did earlier stage technology or healthcare or services related companies.
Okay.
And we had a pretty good run. And at some point, capital became an issue. We needed more capital to continue to grow. Emergent ended up selling our business to Transamerica. And Transamerica at that time had a specialty commercial finance business, principally an asset receivables company. They were big AR lenders, but they wanted to get into some more commercial, specialty commercial finance. And they bought the Emergent SBA lending group, and then they bought the SBA private equity group.
Okay.
And I ended up staying there about a year, and then just wanted to do something different. So I tried to create for my own interest the same kind of investment criteria that we had used when I was in the private equity business. So, I wrote down the things I wanted. I didn't want anything that required heavy capital investment. So, and I'm not a technologist, so I couldn't develop anything. And I didn't want to be in a heavy manufacturing business because of the capital expenditures that were required. I didn't want anything that I thought would be offshored. I didn't want anything that I thought would be, too cyclical in nature. And, through a process of elimination, I really focused on the healthcare industry. And then within that, the staffing component. Because if you talk to most people in healthcare, what they'll tell you is the biggest issues they deal with are reimbursement and having enough staff, particularly clinical staff. So
by this point, Capers, you've seen multiple entrepreneurs and founders. You've evaluated multiple different business models, kind of from the VC private equity lens, and seen a lot of stuff. But by that point, you hadn't completely scratched that itch of your own business, running after it yourself. So that you kind of took a very logical and analytical approach to let me find the right thing that I think I can go have success at.
Right, because unlike a lot of the people that you see that have a technology background or an operations background, I was coming at it from a financial background. I had financed these companies, had partnered with fantastic operators, and now I wanted to operate my own. Because from a wealth creation perspective, the majority of the wealth should go to the founders,
right?
To the people who created the business, who took the risk. And so that's what I wanted to do. That was the itch that I wanted to scratch. But I had limited operational experience, so I wanted to. If I was going to invest my time and money, I wanted to put it into something I could understand. And if you look at our business today, so to kind of wrap up that part of the story, so in creating that model, that was an area of interest, and the next thing we had to do was figure out how to get into the business, right? So I found a very small nurse staffing company based, believe it or not, on Augusta Road. less than a mile from my house.
Crazy.
So I was able to make an offer and acquire that business initially with a commercial staffing company. And the idea was that I would manage the sales and the recruiting, and they would provide the back office support. And we had a good partnership, but I think we both kind of outgrew each other. Yeah. Their business grew, and they needed to focus on their resources on their business. Our business grew, and we needed to control our resources or our assets. Yeah. So I ended up buying their interest out, and we tried a lot of stuff. So ultimately we are in the nurse staffing business, the healthcare staffing business. So we service a variety of healthcare facilities, from acute care hospitals to long-term care facilities, behavioral health facilities, physician offices, a broad spectrum of healthcare providers, because they all have staffing needs. Yeah.
You found a problem area.
We found the
and
problem.
Figured out how to get after it on that.
We found the problem, and then our challenge was really to decide how we would best participate in which market do we want to participate in. So we tried a lot of things. We tried some home care, so home health. Put a nurse in with someone that needed direct care. And we didn't really like that business for a lot of reasons. So we over the years we tried a lot of stuff. Yeah. What I kind of found out is that I had acquired what I call an ongoing startup. Right? It was really one person that was running the show, and all of her systems were kind of in her head. Yeah, there just wasn't a lot on paper. There weren't a lot of processes. It was she kind of ran the company.
But you got customers.
I had customers.
You got a revenue stream.
Yeah. I got nurses.
Right.
And more importantly, at that time, I had a track record. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we would be asked is, well, how long have you been doing this? Yeah. Who can I talk to? Why should I do business?
So you're not Joe Blow with 2 months of experience trying to knock on a door at a big company. You got years of referenceability.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nice.
And she had some great customers. Yeah. She was selling to Spartanburg Regional, Greenville Hospital, and Med. Yeah. So she had established a great track record with these people that we could use as references.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So we really did build on that reputation, and that did jumpstart our company. But there are a lot of different sectors of the healthcare market. You can focus exclusively in long-term care facilities, or you can focus exclusively in hospitals or physician offices. And so there was a lot of trial and error, right? Because when I bought the company, I don't know, maybe we were doing $5,000 a week in revenue. So it was fine for a sole proproprietor, but it was not. We wanted to expand the business. We wanted to expand the company. Yeah.
But it's a brilliant idea, and to think your background coming from the financial side, and then combine that with the desire. Right, you've got this desire to go build this thing, and dialing it in analytically and saying that's the spot, but you were willing to say it doesn't have to be this in the beginning. You just need a little toehold, just a little starter, right? Just a little place to kind of build a fire to begin with. I think that's brilliant.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I looked at it that way at the time, but
history and rearview mirror is all 2020.
Right. We can always revise it. Right. But I knew there was an issue. I knew there was a tremendous market. I think that the year I got into the healthcare staffing or nurse staffing industry, I think nationwide there was billions of dollars spent on supplemental clinical labor. Mm-hmm. So the things I liked about it was that I wasn't inventing anything.
Yeah.
You know, there was a need there. There was a market that existed. I can understand, even though I'm not a clinician, I can understand what the job specifications are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can understand whether or not this individual has the requirements necessary to fill that job. And so it was a very understandable business.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't inventing anything. We were. I kind of thought of it as a distribution company. So we were kind of aggregating this clinical labor and then distributing it out to our clients on an as-needed basis.
Yeah.
So
Matchmaker.
we're matchmaker.
Matchmaker.
We're
Yeah.
we're a specialized matchmaker. Now,
But-
over time, we've refined
Yeah.
that considerably in that the type of placements we want to make.
Yeah.
We much prefer to have our nurses and other healthcare providers on longer term assignments.
Yeah.
Because we think that makes them better at their job.
Yeah.
They learn the patients, they learn the facility policies and procedures, and we think they become more
long-term
effective.
contracts.
Got long-term contracts.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Right.
and we think it's a benefit
Yeah.
to the customer,
Yeah.
their patients, and our employees.
What's the business look like today?
So we think that we'll do somewhere around $30 million this year.
Fantastic.
That's great,
Yeah, it's
Capers.
awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
No
you.
doubt.
Thank you. I've got great employees.
And in what time frame from your humble days on Augusta Road and buying that business, how long did that take to build that revenue stream?
Yeah, about 20 years.
Just 20 years.
It's overnight success.
Overnight
Right.
success.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things that most founder entrepreneurs don't appreciate is how long it takes to build a great business.
Right.
It is not 4 years. It's
Right.
not 5 years. And we get a lot of times we get caught up in the discussion about how long till we exit?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, well, as long as it takes
Right.
till you have a real
A
successful
long time.
business, and in most cases, 10 years is you're kind of there.
Right.
If you get really lucky, maybe it's 8, but likely it's more like 15 to 20. It is not for the faint of heart who think they're going to get in and make a quick lick and go.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that particularly tech startups, right? They've seen Facebook and
Right.
Google,
Right.
and so they think that is the model that they would follow.
100% growth year over year.
Yeah,
forever.
right.
Forever.
That's right. But what we did was we set milestones.
Yeah.
How long will it take us to get to $1 million annual revenue? And then from there, 3, and then 5, and then 8,
Right.
and then 10, and then
Yep.
So we have built,
Yeah.
every year, we have set
steady growth.
we've set growth goals.
Yeah. Nice.
And some years we've made them, some years we haven't.
Yeah.
But if you look back over, the 20-year period, I think I don't know what that average growth would be, but, it's probably 15 to 20% annual growth over a, 15, 20-year period.
Beautiful.
We've got great customers.
Yep.
And we value those relationships tremendously.
Yeah.
And we do everything we can to make sure that we're meeting their needs. We have great employees, both administrative and field. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to meet their needs.
Yep.
And if we're doing our jobs, what we're ultimately doing is improving patient care.
Yeah.
And our customers, and I tell our employees this all the time, they're coming to us because they have a need. If it was easy, they wouldn't pay us to do it.
Right.
But they have an obligation to their patients. They want to make sure that their patients are receiving the quality of care that is expected, and our job is to make sure that we're giving them the clinical labor in order to do that. And so, we've done a lot of things over the time. We're Joint Commission certified, which may or may not mean anything to you. But if you ever go into the hospital and there's this little gold seal on the wall, well, we got the same one in our office. And what that means is that we're managing our company consistent with the policies and procedures of Joint Commission.
You have to go through an audit. Right?
Every 2 years.
You have to go through an
we
audit,
had to go
be
through
certified.
We had to go through an initial certification process, and then every 2 years we go recertified. And I think we've been recertified now 9 times.
Wow. So congratulations.
Well,
that's impressive, and you get to sit here today as a CEO of something that you built.
Yeah.
And that allows you to be an LP in the fund.
That's right. Yeah.
And hopefully help build others.
Well, I hope so.
And share your story. I'm curious, when you look back in those early days, when it's all kind of like experimental and you're trying to find we felt the same thing. You're in a partially lit room, mostly dark, and you're looking for the light switch and you're trying these things. What was the hardest part of that? When you go back, put yourself in that mindset, what's the hardest part of those years?
Not making any money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got some pain.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
There's the pain of the sacrifice.
That's right.
I know it's going to be worth it in the long run,
Yeah.
but it sure does stink right now.
Yeah, and keeping everybody on the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Keeping everybody to share the same vision that you have.
Yeah.
This is where we're
That's
going.
hugely important.
I need you to stay on the bus to help me get there.
Yeah.
And I've got employees that have been with me for 17 years. I've got
Amazing.
employees who've been with me, an employee, I should say, that's been with me 17 of the 20. I've got an employee with been with me probably 15 of the 20, 1 to 13 of the 20.
Yeah.
Others that have
True
been
believers.
True believers.
True believers.
And the thing that gives me the most pleasure is they have done incredibly well as we've grown.
Right.
And so, they've been rewarded for staying on the
Once
bus.
you get that satisfaction of you've gotten to that point, right,
Mm-hmm.
of maybe it's 10 years in or 12 years in or 13 in, it's like sigh of relief. I'm making good money. This is working.
Right.
And it's sustainable. I don't have to sweat every bit of it. Your motivations flip a little bit to how can you help the team do better?
Right.
How can you help other people achieve their goal?
Right.
Right. That's the thing that sort of drives that little bit of a passion over the course of time. I think that's true for a lot of founders is you're hungry, you got that fire burning early, and then once you see that it's working, maybe you don't have not every business is built for an exit. Maybe it's now it's a point of like, oh, this is a money maker.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, pocketbook feels good. But then what becomes the motivator? What becomes the motivator? In your case, I hear you saying it, serving the customer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Serving the employee, having
And
that kind of servant mindset.
And rewarding them,
Right.
By giving them better career opportunities. Making sure that they're, being fairly compensated for what they're doing. And so, so they can take care of their families.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? So they can do, they all have dreams and aspirations. And, being able to assist them in achieving some of those is great, is a great feeling.
Yeah.
And that is that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm curious about one thing, Capers, kind of joking aside,
Yeah.
like not making money,
Yeah.
one of the hardest parts. I mean, you came out of venture capital.
Right.
You understood that business. Was there ever a point in which you were like, I'm just got to bring in outside capital? Or had you made the decision, I'm doing this no matter what, come hell or high water, I'm going to build it. How did you go through that?
Well, it's interesting. My thought was that that I would do a roll-up. That's what I really thought.
Okay.
Is that I would make this small acquisition, because the medical staffing business was and continues to be a very fragmented industry. There are really not a lot of barriers to entry. There are in certain markets, and there are certain customers that are difficult to contract with. But, anybody can hang out a shingle and say, I'm in the medical staffing business. You got a phone book, you're in business. So my thought was that I would start this company, build it to a certain level, bring in outside capital, and really rapidly grow it through acquisition.
Got it.
Yeah.
But I probably got into that same mindset that a lot of owners get into, which is, well, if I can just meet this goal, then if I bring in capital, the value will increase and I'll own more of the business. And then if I can just beat this goal. So every year it was, if I can get a little bit bigger, if I can get a little bit more successful, then if I want to go down the path of raising capital, then the ownership I'll eventually have will be greater. And then it just as we grew and had success, that the interest in taking dilution just kind of faded
you got
away.
a bird in the hand that's working great.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you fell in love with being an operator as well, like growing the business and I hear that mindset of planning the work and then working the plan, that you got that discipline of loving that part of it. I love that part of it. Being an operator is enjoyable. It's fun to make a plan and then hit that plan or miss the plan and adjust and hit the next plan.
Well, as you know, raising capital is a very time-consuming activity. And I just didn't have the time to devote to it. And we had lots of opportunities. We were growing. Again, I got great people, and I just over time that didn't appeal to me. Because I came out of that world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you came out of that.
I know what comes
exactly
with that
what it is.
That's right. I know what comes with it. Right.
Exactly what I was thinking.
And fair warning that we have this discussion all the time, and I don't know how many founders we've had this discussion. We probably are maybe too candid about it. Is capital comes with strings. It's OPM, other people's money.
That's right.
And as soon as you get that check, not only is it not just your money that's mixed into it, there's other people's expectations of you are mixed into it, right? Take us back a little bit into that. You're taking some of the pain of, hey, this is a tough business. The margins are thin. We're not quite there yet. The sacrifices that you make along that way. Yeah. If you look at the totality, how hard was that? And what I'm going to ask the question in a different way. I know the answer to it, but I just want to hear you describe it.
Yeah.
Would you do it all again?
Well, of course.
Okay.
Of course I would now.
Right. Did you ever have the point in time where you said, hey, this ain't working, I'm going to go get a job?
No.
What kept you going then?
I don't know. I think I just had blinders on. I mean, I think I just thought.
You were committed.
Yeah. I in my world, I never thought I had an option. Right? Yeah. Failure was not an option. I mean, how many times have you heard that? Right. I mean, I just wasn't going to fail.
When you sat down and you said, talking about Greenville, the culture of founders,
right,
and knowing that there are all these successful people that have come out of this community, you want to be one of those.
Absolutely.
And you want to have that, whether it makes, a ton of money or whether it makes a little bit of money, you want to have that mark, right? You want to be known as that kind of person who controlled their own destiny. For me, that was a big driver, right? Is I wanted to be a jungle animal, not a zoo animal, right? And I knew and I feel the same thing with you, if you didn't make that choice, you would have lifelong regret.
That's right.
Regret would never end.
That's exactly
that
right.
You didn't try.
And that's what I used to tell people all the time was, I don't want to be 65 and be that guy who says, I could have done that.
I could have done that.
I could have done that. Why didn't I do that?
All it took was 20 years and a bunch of sacrifice.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And, and you do sacrifice.
You do, absolutely.
You sacrifice relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a toll.
It does take a toll.
Yeah.
It takes a toll. It's tough to keep everybody on the bus.
Right.
Because your timeline is not always the same timeline that other people have, right?
Right.
You talk
Sense of urgency might be a little different.
Well, you talk about these entrepreneurs today who think, in 3 to 5 years they're going to be kicking it in the Bahamas, right?
Yeah.
Is that realistic? Maybe for somebody, but most of them is not. Mm-hmm. And it's a grind. It's, getting up every day, going to the office. When things go bad, you got to convince everybody that it's going to get better. Let's don't jump ship.
Yeah. Stay with the program.
Stay with the program. Yeah. We got a plan. We got a vision.
Yeah.
We're going to get a curveball. Stay on the bus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's years of that. That's the crazy part is, it's easy to look back on it and say, you kind of box it up and don't remember a lot of it. But if you go back and do the math, there's, I know for me, 5-6 years of, and I say it all the time, eating turds every day, right? It's just hard work. It's get up every day, go after it, break the rocks, and don't quit.
Yeah.
Just don't quit.
Which is the 20 years, too.
Right.
I mean, there's been some studies done. I mean, the incremental value that gets created for so many businesses beyond year 10, where it's like year 12, 13, 14, and from there, so much value often gets created versus a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders think, 7 years at the most.
Right.
Well, no, it's 10.
I got to be rich 7 years from now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I do think, though, in their defense, every investor they talk to talks to them in terms of 5-year horizon.
You're right.
I got to have my money in 5 years,
right?
Because most of them have 10-year partnerships.
Yep.
So they want to be in and out in 5 years.
Right.
So I do think that seed gets planted.
It does.
Absolutely.
They hear it all the time.
Yeah, they hear it all the time. So they're on a 5-year horizon. They think they're in 5 years they're going to be successful or fail.
Right.
But I don't know what percentage of privately owned businesses don't have outside capital.
Yeah.
95%. I don't know.
Yeah,
and it's just failure's not an option. You got to get the right people around you. You got to make sure they're incentivized, and you just got to keep the vision.
Yeah.
And you got to keep, you just got to keep grinding at it. Because there's no such thing as overnight success.
That's a great message for our founders that hopefully a few watch this occasionally.
Yes.
That it is a grind, right? It is if you're coming into startup land and you're expecting it to be rosy, it hopefully we don't scare people. That's not the intent. It's just the reality of great businesses and great business people who have had a vision and executed on that vision. It is a long game.
Yeah. And you need to enjoy what you're doing.
You got to love it.
I mean, you got to love it. And if you don't love it, it's, ultimately you're probably not going to be successful because you're not going to be willing to spend the time and energy. And I know I keep saying this, but you got to have the right team.
Yeah.
You got to have the right team. And, we've had a lot of people that have not ultimately stayed with our company because they were not the right fit.
Yeah.
But the ones who have are outstanding.
And don't you find that you figure out that over the course of time as well? What's a great match for you?
Sure you do.
On your team. If you're the quarterback, what do you need on your team to be successful? And how many times you try a person and you want to make that bet and, you're 3, 4, 5 years in and you're realizing it's not a great fit. Yeah. They're probably realizing it's not a great fit. But even that is a long is a long game as well.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out that right team that can be with you for the long
Well, not
haul.
only right team, but what's their skill set?
Yeah.
Okay, they're not great in this, but this is really what they're good at, and getting them to realize that and take ownership. And that's the other thing, is to get your employees to think like owners.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to buy in, and the employees that have been with me, the ones I was referencing earlier, have been there 17 years, 15 years, 13 years. Medfirst is as important to them as it is to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they absolutely care.
Awesome. That's awesome.
About our company.
Yeah.
Because they have. It's not just me that's there every day. They're there. They're showing up. They're taking care of our customers. They're taking care of our employees. It's important to them.
Yeah.
And I probably have a little more patience with somebody in terms of their job performance if it's important and they want it to be successful and they need a little coaching.
Yeah.
I'm much more likely to want to coach that person to being successful.
Attitude goes a long
Absolutely.
way.
As opposed to somebody who has all the potential in the world but always has a reason why they can't do it.
Yeah.
And they're probably on the wrong bus. So.
This has been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some great nuggets of information out of there.
Thanks.
I mean, team for sure, commitment. This is what it takes. You heard it from somebody who's built it. Overnight success after 20 years. So thanks so much for being on the podcast,
Thanks
Capers.
for asking me.
This has been fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got some tidbits of information out of that one. I know I did. Some great nuggets that we can take along with us throughout the day. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Founderville.bc.